In 2007, scientists did something that sounds like a dare. They took a group of tiny animals, loaded them onto a rocket, flew them up past the edge of the sky, and then opened the door. No spacesuit, no capsule, no air. They exposed living creatures directly to the raw vacuum of open space, to the freezing cold, and to the unfiltered radiation of the Sunday. Every animal you can think of would die in seconds out there. A human would not last a minute, and these scientists knew that. They were not being cruel. They were testing a hunch about one specific animal that seems to refuse the rules the rest of us live by. When the mission came home, they checked the creatures. Many of them were still alive. Some went on to have healthy babies, as if nothing had happened at all. The animal is called a tardigrade. Most people have never heard the name, and almost no one has ever seen one, because they are smaller than a grain of sand. You cannot spot them with your eyes. And yet right now, today, there are probably thousands of them living within a few steps of your front door, in a patch of moss, or a clump of damp lichen. The toughest animal we have ever found is not a shark, or a scorpion, or anything you would guess. It is a near invisible speck in your backyard, and the way it survives is even stranger than the fact that it does. Let me show you what a tardigrade really is. Up close, under a microscope, a tardigrade looks almost cuddly. People call them water bears, and you can see why. They have a plump, segmented body and 8 stubby legs, each tipped with little claws, and they lumber along slowly, like a bear cub the size of a dust mote. Most are between 1/10 of a millimeter and just over a millimeter long. To you, that is a dot. To the tardigrade, that body is a fortress. They are not insects. They are not worms. They belong to their own branch of the animal kingdom, all to themselves, and there are more than 1,300 known species of them. They live almost everywhere there is water, even a thin film of it. The deep sea floor, mountaintops, hot springs, polar ice, and, most famously, the moss and lichen growing on rocks, trees, walls, and roofs in just about every neighborhood on Earth. They need that water to be active. A tardigrade spends its normal life swimming through the tiny droplets trapped between plant leaves, eating, crawling, and laying eggs. As long as there is water, it is just an ordinary little animal. People have actually known about these creatures for a surprisingly long time. They were first described back in the 1700s, when early scientists, peering through simple microscopes, noticed odd little 8-legged animals trundling through drops of pond water. One Italian researcher gave them the name that stuck, tardigrade, which means slow stepper, after their lumbering walk. The friendlier nickname, water bear, came from that same slow, bear-like shuffle. And from the Himalayan peaks to the deep ocean floor, from boiling hot springs to solid polar ice, they have since been found in places that should hold no animal life at all. Yet for more than 2 centuries, they were treated as a mere curiosity, a charming oddity in a water drop. Almost no one suspected that this harmless little speck was quietly the toughest animal on the planet. That part, we only worked out much more recently. The magic only begins when the water runs out. Here's where it gets strange. When a tardigrade's world dries up, it does not panic, and it does not simply die. It transforms. It pulls in its legs, squeezes most of the water out of its own body, and curls into a tiny, shriveled, lifeless-looking ball. Scientists call this shape a ton. In this state, the tardigrade is not really living in the way we usually mean. Its body processes slow to a near stop, dropping to a fraction of a percent of normal. It is not eating, it is not moving, it is barely, by some measures, alive at all. And that is the whole secret. The tardigrade does not toughen up to survive the impossible. It opts out. It switches itself off, almost completely, and waits. A dried-out tune can sit there for years, looking like nothing more than a speck of dust. Then, when a single drop of water touches it, the tardigrade swells back up, uncurls its legs, and walks away as if it had only paused for a moment. It can come back from being dried to a crisp. What makes this work is how complete the protection has to be. Inside a living cell are countless delicate parts, folded proteins, strands of genetic code, tiny molecular machines that keep the cell running, and almost all of them depend on water to hold their shape. Take that water away too fast, and they unravel and fall apart for good. The tardigrade somehow freezes them all in place at the exact instant of drying, so that when water floods back in, everything is still right where it belongs, ready to start again. That trick, the ability to shut down and restart without falling apart, is the foundation of everything else this animal can do. So, how tough is a tardigrade in that shutdown state? The list is almost hard to believe. In the ton form, tardigrades have survived being chilled to around minus 272 degrees Celsius, just a hair above absolute zero, the coldest temperature that can physically exist. They have survived being squeezed under crushing pressure, far greater than anything at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. And they have survived doses of radiation that would be instantly lethal to us. A dose of radiation that would kill a human is around 5 to 10 units on the scale scientists use. Tardigrades have shrugged off doses around 1,000 times higher. 1,000 times. The same blast of radiation that would wipe out a person barely registers to a dried-up water bear. Which brings us back to space. Did it? Now you can understand why those scientists thought a tardigrade might survive out there, where there is no air, brutal cold, and raw solar radiation all at once. So, in 2007, on a European Space Agency mission, they sent dried-out tardigrades into low orbit and exposed them directly to the vacuum and radiation of space for about 10 days. This was not a matter of tucking them safely inside the spacecraft. Plenty of creatures had ridden along inside sealed capsules before. These tardigrades were placed outside, with nothing at all between their tiny bodies and the void. When the samples came back and were given water, many of the animals revived. Some even laid eggs that hatched into healthy young. It was one of the first times any animal had ever been shown to survive direct exposure to open space. A creature you can find in your gutter had just done something no astronaut could do without a suit. But I promised you the real story is stranger than the headline. And here is where I have to be honest with you. Because most videos stop at the cheerful version and leave out the truth. The tardigrades did not all survive. Not even close. The vacuum of space, by itself, barely bothered them. That part is real. But the sun's full, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation was a different story. The tardigrades that took the complete blast of solar UV mostly died. Only a small handful of them came back at all. So the honest headline is not that tardigrades are invincible in space. It is that they can survive the vacuum and cold of space. But the sun's raw radiation is still a serious killer, even for them. And that matters, because it points to the real truth about this animal. Tardigrades are not indestructible. They are not magic. They are the world champions at one very specific strategy, switching off and riding out the storm. And even that strategy has limits. Let me show you those limits, because they are part of what makes the tardigrade believable instead of a myth. The biggest weakness is heat. Cold, the tardigrade laughs at, but sustained heat is a genuine threat. A careful study found that even in their tough, dried-out tune state, tardigrades start dying once the temperature is held around 82 degrees Celsius for an hour. And the longer the heat lasts, the lower that deadly threshold drops. And when a tardigrade is active and full of water, living its normal life, it is far more fragile than that. Active tardigrades can be killed by temperatures not much warmer than a hot summer day. So the same animal that survives the cold of space can be undone by a long, hot afternoon if it is caught awake and wet. Read that again, because it tells you exactly what a tardigrade is and is not. It is nearly unkillable when it is dormant. It is just a soft, tiny animal when it is awake. And that is the key that unlocks the whole story. Every one of those incredible feats, the deep cold, the crushing pressure, the killing radiation, the vacuum of space, the tardigrade survives them in the ton state, dried out and shut down. Wake it up, give it water, and it goes right back to being an ordinary creature that can die from ordinary things. The superpower is not a tough body. The superpower is the off switch. If you find this as fascinating as I do, the idea that survival can mean shutting yourself down instead of fighting harder, take a second to subscribe. Every week, we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice, and the tardigrade still has a few secrets left to give up. So what is actually happening inside that dried up speck? How does a living thing dry out completely and still come back? For a long time, this was a genuine mystery. You would think that drying out an animal would destroy it. When most cells lose their water, their delicate machinery collapses and tears itself apart. The tardigrade found a way around that. As it dries, the tardigrade fills its cells with special protective molecules. Some are unique proteins found in tardigrades and almost nowhere else. As the water leaves, these substances turn the inside of each cell into a kind of glass. Not glass like a window, but a solid, still, frozen-in-place state that locks every fragile part of the cell exactly where it belongs. Nothing can drift, break, or rot, because nothing can move at all. The animal becomes a tiny glass statue of itself, holding everything in perfect position until water returns. And it gets stranger, because tardigrades have another trick aimed straight at radiation. Scientists discovered a protein in tardigrades that physically wraps around the animal's DNA and shields it, like a bodyguard, standing over the most important instructions in the cell. It helps block the damage that radiation would normally do. And here is the part that got laboratories around the world excited. When researchers put that same tardigrade protein into human cells in a dish, those human cells became more resistant to radiation too. A protein from a backyard speck, protecting human DNA. That is not science fiction. That happened in a lab. This is exactly why scientists are so obsessed with tardigrades. And it is not just curiosity. If we can understand how a tardigrade dries out and survives, we might learn to store human cells, tissues, vaccines, and medicines completely dry, with no refrigeration, and revive them whenever we need them. That could change how medicine reaches places with no electricity. If we can understand its radiation shield, it could help protect astronauts on long journeys, or even patients during radiation treatment. The tardigrade is not just a curiosity, it is a problem solver, and we are still reading its answers. And there is an even bigger question hiding in all of this, one that reaches past medicine and into the origin of life itself. If a tiny animal can survive the vacuum, the cold, and the radiation of space, then scientists have to ask something strange. Could living things, or the seeds of them, travel between worlds? Picture a rock blasted off one planet by a giant impact, drifting through space for ages, then crashing down onto another. Could something dried into glass, like a tardigrade, ride along inside that rock and survive the journey? We have no proof that this has ever actually happened, and I want to be clear about that. But the tardigrade shows us that the trip is not automatically deadly, the way we once assumed it must be. And that single fact quietly reshapes how researchers think about where life could exist and how it might spread across the universe. A speck from your backyard helped raise one of the deepest questions in all of science. There is one more thing about the tardigrade that gets under my skin a little, in the best way, the matter of time. Because a tardigrade in its tune state is not really aging in the way you and I age. It is paused. And that raises a haunting question. How long can one stay paused? The honest answer is that we are still figuring it out. We have solid records of tardigrades reviving after being dried out for several years, and even after roughly a decade. One sample of moss, frozen in Antarctica for about 30 years, held tardigrades that woke up and reproduced when it was thawed. You may have heard wilder claims about animals revived from museum moss over 100 years old. Those stories are not reliable, so I will not sell them to you. But the verified truth is strange enough. This animal can skip years of time as if they never happened, then pick its life back up the moment conditions improve. Now, I should clear up one popular myth while we are here, because the internet loves to stretch this animal into a cartoon. You may have heard that tardigrades can survive anything, even being fired from a gun. The truth is more careful. Scientists really did shoot frozen tardigrades from a special gun to test impacts the kind a meteorite might cause. The tardigrades survived being slammed at high speed, up to a point. Past that speed, they died. So even this test has a ceiling. Tardigrades are astonishing, but they are not beyond the laws of physics. Hit them hard enough, heat them long enough, and they die like anything else. And maybe that is the most interesting thing of all. The toughest animal on Earth is not some armored monster. It is a soft, slow, nearly blind speck that gave up the fight entirely and learned to wait instead. So let us go back to that moment, the door opening in orbit, raw space pouring in over a tray of dried up water bears. You know now what really happened. Most of the ones hit with the sun's full radiation died. But the vacuum and the cold, the things that would kill almost any other living creature in seconds, simply could not touch the ones that had shut themselves down into glass. That is what a tardigrade really is. Not an indestructible super being, but a master of one perfect trick. When the world becomes impossible, it stops being alive for a while. It dries into a speck, locks its body into glass, shields its own DNA, and waits out the cold, the radiation, the vacuum, even the slow passage of years. Then, with a single drop of water, it comes back. So here is my question for you, and I think about it more than I should. If the single toughest animal we have ever found is a microscopic creature in the moss outside your window, surviving conditions that would erase us, how much life is hiding all around you right now, too small to see, quietly outlasting everything? If this changed the way you see the moss on a wall or the lichen on a rock, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice. And the next time it rains and the dry moss in your yard turns soft and green again, remember what just woke up inside it.